House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 3 introduces us to the new Queen of King's Landing, the enormous challenges that come with wearing the crown, and a twist that changes everything. At the same time, it almost feels like Corlys Velaryon has inherited the spirit of his late brother, Vaemond. The episode is titled Rhaenyra Triumphant. But after watching everything Rhaenyra goes through, you can't help but wonder if this is what victory looks like, then what does defeat even look like? One thing this episode does brilliantly is tell the story almost entirely from Rhaenyra's point of view, allowing us to experience every victory, every setback, and every difficult decision alongside her. But before we dive into the main story, let's talk about the opening. Instead of beginning with the traditional structure, the episode starts with a cold open, a scene that plays before the opening title sequence. In that scene, Ormond Hightower is confronted by the overwhelming sight of 3 dragons, and he's informed that Rhaenyra has officially become queen. He's ordered to abandon the campaign and return to Old Town. Realistically, Ormond has very few options. Even with an army of nearly 15,000 soldiers, standing against dragons is a battle he simply cannot win. Vermithor alone would be enough to devastate his entire force. However, the situation becomes much more interesting when Daemon demands that Daeron Targaryen, the youngest son of Viserys and Alicent, be handed over. Ormond responds by sending a young boy with Daemon, but this creates an immediate mystery. Fans quickly notice that the boy doesn't match what we've been led to expect. Earlier in the season, another young man dressed in Hightower colors appeared alongside Ormond, leading many to believe that was Daeron. There's another detail that makes things even stranger. Daeron was born shortly after the celebration of Jacaerys Velaryon's birth, meaning he should be around 15 years old. Yet the boy we see here looks much younger, closer to 12 or 13. Even Rhaenyra points this out later in the episode, admitting she never expected Daeron to be so young. As the story unfolds, the truth becomes clear. This boy isn't Daeron at all. The real Daeron is the one briefly shown earlier in the season, meaning Ormond Hightower has deliberately tried to deceive Rhaenyra. It's a bold gamble, and you have to give Ormond credit for his courage. Standing against a queen who now commands 6 dragons is nothing short of reckless. One thing is certain. After this episode, the debate between Team Black and Team Green is only going to become even more intense. Before moving on, let's talk about the cold open, because it's actually a pretty significant creative choice. Cold opens are incredibly rare in both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Even across the entire run of Game of Thrones, only a handful of episodes open this way. So whenever the writers choose this format, it's usually because the opening scene is important enough to stand on its own before the title sequence. And in this case, it absolutely works. The cold open immediately establishes the stakes and sets the tone for everything that follows. It feels less like the continuation of a previous episode and more like the beginning of an entirely new chapter. In fact, this episode strengthens the theory many fans have had ever since the season began, that episodes 1 and 2 were originally intended to conclude the previous season, while episode 3 was designed to be the true season 3 premiere. The structure certainly supports that idea. After Rhaenyra secures King's Landing, the episode shifts its focus to the realities of ruling. It's very similar to the opening of season 2, when Aegon II had just become king and was seen listening to the concerns and petitions of the smallfolk. This episode mirrors that moment almost perfectly, creating a deliberate parallel between Aegon's reign and Rhaenyra's. Even the opening title sequence reinforces that feeling. The costume Rhaenyra wears during the title imagery now appears in the episode itself, creating a smooth visual transition between the opening credits and the story. It's a subtle but effective detail, almost as if the series is telling us that a new phase of the Dance of the Dragons has officially begun. As I mentioned earlier, this entire episode is about Rhaenyra discovering that winning the throne is only the beginning. Her greatest battles aren't on the battlefield anymore, they're inside the kingdom she's inherited. And the first major problem she faces is a financial disaster. The crown has no gold. At first, that doesn't seem to make much sense. Before Rhaenyra and Aegon, the realm enjoyed decades of peace under King Jaehaerys I, followed by another long period of stability during the reign of King Viserys I. With so many peaceful years, the royal treasury should have been overflowing with wealth by the time Viserys died. So the obvious question is, where did all that gold go? The answer was quietly hinted at in the previous season. We learned that the crown's wealth had been secretly moved for safekeeping, with much of it deposited in the Iron Bank of Bravos, the same powerful institution that fans of Game of Thrones will remember for financing kings and kingdoms, including lending money to Cersei Lannister during her reign. By the time Rhaenyra finally takes King's Landing, she discovers the devastating truth. The fortune Viserys left behind is gone. Most of the royal treasury had already been divided and transferred by Tyrion Lannister. Large portions were entrusted to the Hightowers, the Lannisters, and the Iron Bank, all as part of a strategy to ensure that, even if Rhaenyra captured the capital, she would inherit the throne but not the resources needed to rule it. Whatever wealth remained in King's Landing had already been spent during Aegon II's reign, so although Rhaenyra has finally won the Iron Throne, she inherits an empty treasury, a kingdom at war, and a crown that comes with almost no resources to sustain it. In other words, she has won the kingdom but lost the means to govern it. And that creates the exact same crisis we saw during Aegon II's rule. The biggest question is no longer who sits on the Iron Throne, it's how the people are going to survive. Last season, the city suffered because of the naval blockade. Now, even though that blockade is over, the damage has already been done. Food is scarce, the royal treasury is empty, and the small folk are once again paying the price for a war they never chose. There's another detail the episode keeps drawing our attention to: the rats. If you've been watching closely, you'll notice that rats have been present in the Red Keep since the very beginning of House of the Dragon. We saw them during Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra's wedding, they appeared before the blood and cheese incident, and they were the reason the castle employed rat catchers in the first place. Ironically, after Blood and Cheese, Aegon II executed every rat catcher in King's Landing out of rage. The result? The rat infestation only became worse. Now the Red Keep is crawling with them. But the rats aren't just there for realism, they're symbolic. Throughout seasons 1 and 2, the show has repeatedly used them as visual foreshadowing. In any home, rats are a sign of neglect and decay. They appear when those in power stop caring for the place they're meant to protect. And that's exactly what the Red Keep has become. The House of the Dragon is rotting from within. One by one, the Targaryens are losing the very thing that made them unstoppable, their dragons. Every dragon that falls takes another piece of their power with it, bringing the dynasty one step closer to its inevitable downfall. The rats aren't just invading the castle. They're a reminder that the House of the Dragon is slowly consuming itself from the inside. At this point, it's clear that no one truly has control over the situation. Still, Rhaenyra comes up with a temporary solution. She orders the wealthy nobles of King's Landing, those who accepted Aegon's rule without resistance, to surrender their gold to the crown. In return, they're left with little more than the city's growing rat problem. Whether that actually solves anything is another question entirely. As Daemon points out, squeezing the nobility while ignoring the suffering of the common people rarely ends well. Ironically, Daemon made the very same mistake last season. While the small folk of King's Landing were starving, he barely gave their hardships a second thought. Rhaenyra used that public frustration to strengthen support for her own claim. That's why she understands better than anyone how dangerous it is to turn the people against the throne. Her emergency measures may ease the food crisis for now, but every difficult decision creates new enemies. And the first cracks don't appear among the Greens, they appear within Rhaenyra's own supporters. The biggest source of tension comes from Corlys Velaryon. As he told Adam and Alan in the previous episode, he has almost nothing left to give them except his family name. Now he approaches Rhaenyra with a request that could reshape House Velaryon forever. He wants his two illegitimate sons to be legitimized, to be officially recognized as true Velaryons. It's a deeply personal request, but it's also a political one. For Corlys, it's about securing the future of his house. For Rhaenyra, it's another impossible decision that could strengthen one ally while creating resentment among many others. And that's the burden of being queen. Every solution comes with a price. Corlys wants Rhaenyra to officially legitimize Alan, so he can name him the heir to Driftmark. But for Rhaenyra, this isn't a simple favor, it's a decision with enormous political consequences. The first problem is history. For years, Driftmark was meant to pass to Lucerys Velaryon. That wasn't just Rhaenyra's wish, it was a promise made by King Viserys himself when he arranged the marriage between Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra Velaryon. Corlys knew better than anyone that Rhaenyra had no interest in women. Even so, he chose to protect the future of House Velaryon by recognizing Lucerys as his rightful heir. He stood by that decision despite the criticism from his own brother, Vaemond Velaryon, who publicly challenged Luke's claim. Even after Daemon executed Vaemond, Corlys never changed his position. Part of the reason was that Lucerys was promised to Rhaenyra Targaryen, Corlys' own granddaughter, ensuring that Velaryon blood would still remain tied to Driftmark. But everything changed with Lucerys' death. Now, for the first time, Corlys is free to choose a new heir. From his perspective, Alan has earned that right. He fought for Rhaenyra, helped her secure King's Landing, and proved his loyalty when it mattered most. That's why Corlys becomes frustrated by Rhaenyra's hesitation. However, Rhaenyra's concerns go far beyond Driftmark. They're about the legitimacy of the Iron Throne itself. For years, the realm whispered that Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey were not Rhaenyra's true sons. Those rumors never turned into open rebellion because King Viserys stood firmly behind Rhaenyra until his dying day. but Viserys is gone. And now Rhaenyra stands alone. If her very first act as queen is to legitimize Corlys' illegitimate sons, she risks reopening the same controversy that has haunted her own children for years. The lords of Westeros would inevitably ask, if Alan can be legitimized, then what does that say about the legitimacy of Rhaenyra's own heirs? That question becomes even more dangerous now that Joffrey is next in line for the Iron Throne. The tension finally explodes when Corlys openly shouts inside the Red Keep, questioning the legitimacy of Rhaenyra's sons in front of everyone. It's a shocking public confrontation and one that could carry serious consequences. What punishment, if any, follows this incident is something the series is clearly saving for the episodes ahead. Well, if nothing else, Vaemond Valerian's spirit would probably be satisfied after witnessing all of this. But Corlys isn't the only challenge standing in Rhaenyra's way. Her next opponent is something far more powerful than any army: the Faith of the Seven. When Rhaenyra requests her official coronation, Septon Eustace refuses. This is the very same Septon who crowned Aegon II after King Viserys' death. But now, he insists that he will not perform another coronation until he has undeniable proof that Aegon is truly dead. Without seeing Aegon's body, he refuses to recognize Rhaenyra as the rightful ruler. At that moment, Rhaenyra realizes something important. The faith is not on her side. Septon Eustace also warns her that making an enemy of the faith would be a serious mistake. He makes it clear that, in the eyes of the Seven, dragons do not grant divine authority. Owning dragons may win battles, but it does not automatically earn the blessing of the faith. And that's a dangerous situation for any ruler. History has already shown what happens when a king or queen underestimates the power of the faith. Fans of Game of Thrones will remember how the faith militant grew strong enough to challenge the Iron Throne itself. Despite all the wealth, soldiers, and political influence at the crown's disposal, the monarchy found itself trapped by religious authority. When the conflict finally reached its breaking point, the consequences were catastrophic. That's why this confrontation feels so important. Rhaenyra may have conquered King's Landing with dragons, but winning the support of the people and the blessing of the faith is a battle that dragons alone cannot win. To understand why this moment is so important, we need to look at the role of the Faith of the Seven in Westeros. The Faith of the Seven is the dominant religion across most of the Seven Kingdoms. However, it's far from the only faith in Westeros. In the north, the people still worship the old gods, praying before the sacred weirwood trees that have stood for thousands of years. On the Iron Islands, the people follow the drowned god, while the Targaryens originally worshipped the gods of Old Valyria before coming to Westeros. Everything changed after Aegon the Conqueror united the Seven Kingdoms. Rather than forcing the people to accept the Valyrian faith, Aegon embraced the faith of the Seven to strengthen his rule. Before beginning his conquest, he sought the blessing of the High Septon, who crowned him without resistance. From that moment onward, a tradition was established. Every new king or queen of Westeros would receive their official coronation from the faith of the Seven through the High Septon, giving their reign both political and religious legitimacy. But this alliance has always been complicated. The faith has its own beliefs and laws, many of which directly conflict with Targaryen traditions. The Targaryens practice marriage within their own bloodline to preserve the purity of their family, and they claim authority through dragons, both ideas that the faith has historically viewed with suspicion or outright disapproval. That tension has existed since the very beginning of Targaryen rule. So when the faith refuses to immediately recognize Rhaenyra's claim, it's not just a political obstacle. It's a reminder that ruling Westeros requires more than dragons and armies. A ruler also needs the approval of the institutions that shape the beliefs of the realm, and the Faith of the Seven is one of the most powerful among them. The conflict between the Targaryens and the Faith of the Seven is nothing new. Throughout history, the two have clashed multiple times, but in the end, the faith could never truly stand against dragons. That's why Septon Eustace tells Rhaenyra that dragons are a form of profane magic. From the faith's perspective, dragons are unnatural and dangerous. But to the Valyrians, dragons are something entirely different. They are the last surviving miracle of a lost civilization, the very symbol of House Targaryen's power. At that moment, Rhaenyra realizes the truth. The faith will never fully stand behind her. So if she can't win the faith, she'll have to win the hearts of the small folk instead. This is exactly what Otto Hightower understood from the very beginning. Once Rhaenyra and her family left King's Landing, Otto filled the Red Keep with the symbols of the Faith of the Seven, especially the seven-pointed star, sending a clear message that the Greens ruled with the faith's blessing. That's why the contrast feels so striking. The same Septon who crowned Aegon II without hesitation now refuses to give Rhaenyra that same legitimacy. But that's only one of Rhaenyra's problems. The next challenge comes from the very people who helped her win the war, the Dragon Riders. Powerful Dragon Riders aren't just warriors. They're ambitious men with dreams of their own. When a man is knighted, he's given a title that defines his identity. So when Ulf is asked what name he wishes to take, his first answer is Ulf Targaryen. That single moment reveals exactly what he wants. Not just a dragon. He wants the Targaryen name, the prestige, the glory, and, as he has already made clear, lands of his own near Harrenhal. Instead, he's granted the title Ser Ulf the White. Hugh becomes Ser Hugh the Hammer, while Adam is named Ser Adam of Hull. But Adam had hoped for something much greater. He wanted to be recognized as Adam Valerian. It's a subtle reminder that titles can honor someone, but they don't always give them what they truly desire. Hugh then reveals another detail that could become extremely important. He tells Rhaenyra that his wife is no longer in King's Landing and is most likely in Tumbleton. Fans may remember that back in the previous season, Hugh's wife wanted to leave the capital and stay with her brother there. Later in the episode, one of the Dragon Keepers informs Rhaenyra that the Hightower forces have established a strong position around Tumbleton. That creates a dangerous dilemma. If Rhaenyra attacks Tumbleton, Hugh's own family could be caught in the middle of the battle. And that kind of personal connection has the potential to divide loyalties. Suddenly, all three of Rhaenyra's dragon riders come with complications of their own. By the way, did you recognize the Dragon Keeper? He's the same man who, years earlier, helped young Aegon, Jacaerys, and Lucerys bond with their dragons during their childhood. But if you think these are Rhaenyra's only problems, you're forgetting the people waiting for her back on Dragonstone, because the Black Council is about to become another battlefield entirely. When Corlys, now serving as Rhaenyra's hand, asks whether she plans to bring her Dragonstone small council to King's Landing, Rhaenyra gives a simple answer: no. And honestly, her decision makes perfect sense. Throughout the previous season, nearly every decision she made was questioned by her own council. Instead of supporting their queen during the most critical moments of the war, they constantly doubted her judgment. We even saw Ser Alfred Broom travel to Harrenhal in an attempt to turn Aemond against Rhaenyra. When she wanted to personally join the fighting, her council tried to stop her. At one point, Jacaerys even ordered Ser Laurent to keep Rhaenyra from leaving, believing she was risking too much. After experiencing all of that, it's no surprise that Rhaenyra no longer trusts the council she once relied on. Instead, she chooses to build a new council in King's Landing. The problem, however, is that leaving Dragonstone in the hands of the old council may prove to be a dangerous mistake. Throughout this entire episode, Rhaenyra barely gets a moment to breathe. Every scene throws another crisis at her. Every meeting brings another impossible decision. And all of this is happening while she's still mourning the death of her son, Jacaerys. One of the episode's most emotional moments comes when Alicent tells Rhaenyra that she'll remain a prisoner until both of Alicent's sons are dead. Rhaenyra's response is heartbreaking. She quietly says, "Now you understand how I feel." It's a line filled with grief rather than anger. Another interesting detail throughout the episode is how often people ask Rhaenyra, what would Viserys have done? Even Rhaenyra herself asks Alicent how she managed to keep the kingdom functioning during Viserys' reign. But there's something everyone seems to overlook. The stability of Viserys' reign wasn't created by the king alone. A huge part of that stability came from Otto Hightower. Love him or hate him, Otto was an exceptional hand of the king. He served King Jaehaerys I, then King Viserys I, and despite all his political schemes, he always kept the machinery of the realm running. He knew where the crown's wealth was. He knew how to manage the nobility. And most importantly, he never allowed chaos to spiral completely out of control. Now that Otto is gone, the kingdom is beginning to fall apart. Which also reminds us of an important truth. Viserys may have been a good king, but much of the peace during his reign was possible because he had one of the most capable hands in Westerosi history. Meanwhile, there's one character who's enjoying this entire situation more than anyone else: Daemon Targaryen. For the first time in a long while, Daemon seems completely at ease. The battles are behind him, Rhaenyra sits on the throne, and he can finally dream about rebuilding a Targaryen empire powerful enough to rival the glory of old Valyria itself. At least, that's what he believes. Because in the world of House of the Dragon, peace never lasts for long. As Rhaenyra makes clear, the dream of restoring the glory of old Valyria can wait. Right now, her only priority is securing King's Landing. Holding the Iron Throne is far more important than chasing distant ambitions while the realm is still at war. That said, Daemon's next journey is shaping up to be one of the most interesting storylines going forward. Rhaenyra sends him to the Vale to meet with Lady Jane Arryn and strengthen the alliance she has already worked so hard to build. And we already know why the Vale is so important. Since the previous episodes, we've learned that Daemon's daughter, Rhaena Targaryen, is there along with the wild dragon Sheepstealer. That means Daemon's visit to the Vale won't just be a political mission. It could also become a deeply personal one. Another interesting detail comes when Daemon tells Rhaenyra that Baela spotted the burned remains of Sunfire. Sunfire was critically wounded during the battle at Rook's Rest, and not far from the dragon's scorched body lay another burned corpse. Baela witnessed both scenes from above, leaving behind a mystery that could become important later in the story. Meanwhile, the messenger Rhaenyra had previously sent to King's Landing has finally returned, bringing back the latest information from the capital and helping Rhaenyra piece together everything that has happened since the battle. There's also a subtle visual detail worth noticing. Throughout this episode, Rhaenyra continues to wear a sword at her side. It may seem like a small change, but it says a lot about her character. After being forced to draw a blade herself in the previous episode, she no longer looks like a reluctant heir. She looks like a queen who's beginning to accept the harsh reality of ruling through strength. It's a quiet moment, but one that perfectly reflects how much Rhaenyra has changed in such a short time. And that's a wrap on House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 3. This episode proved that winning the Iron Throne is only the beginning. Rhaenyra may finally wear the crown, but every decision she makes creates new enemies. Between the empty treasury, the faith of the Seven, Corlys' demands, and growing tension within her own council, her greatest battle has only just begun. Now all eyes are on Daemon's journey to the Vale, the future of Rhaena and Sheepstealer, and the conflicts waiting to erupt across Westeros. The Dance of the Dragons is becoming more dangerous with every episode. What did you think of Episode 3? Which scene was your favorite? And whose side are you on, Team Black or Team Green? Let me know in the comments below. I read your comments and love seeing your theories. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Loreflick, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next House of the Dragon breakdown. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, fire will rain, blood will be spilled, and the Dance of the Dragons is far from over.